All right, you're live.
Everybody, welcome back to the live stream. We have special guests with us, Tim Pool. Everybody knows Tim Pool. He's a journalist, political commentator. He's from Chicago, from my neighborhood. We grew up literally maybe 2 blocks away from each other. He gained fame by live streaming the Occupy Wall Street protests in 2011, showcasing his unique style of interactive broadcast journalism. His work has been featured by prominent media outlets such as MSNBC, NBC, Reuters, Al Jazeera English. Today, Tim Pool is a prominent online personality with over 2 million subscribers on his YouTube channel and Timcast IRL. Welcome back to the show, Tim Pool. Hey, Tim.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
It's going well. Now, how are things now? There was a lot of hubbub about you and your show the other day. People were saying you were quitting.
I almost did, to be honest.
And I saw, let me play this little piece of video. You were lamenting about, it is hard to run a show. I got to tell you, the last thing I ever wanted to do was be a boss or own a company or it is. But here's you lamenting about it. I can relate to this. Let me play this.
We had our 12th studio failure this morning.
The new one.
Yeah, the new studio failed. And, my attitude with that is kind of just like, if we can't make cameras and a computer work, and despite all the previous failures we've had, there's not a single person here who can make sure that either the studio is operating or secondary studio is operating. We've gotten to a point in the company where everyone's kind of just kicked their feet up and said, I'm doing what I need to be doing. Yeah. And then that just means I'm Sisyphus pushing the rock up. The problem is people are sitting on the rock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tim, you're not quitting your show or anything or shutting down, are you?
Well, so the bulk of the conversation was actually, the idea at first was keep doing the morning show, which is Timcast News on YouTube, and probably end the nightly show, which is Timcast IRL, which we're not going to be doing. But for those that don't know, I actually host 2 different shows every day. So I have the morning show, which is about an hour and a half of segments throughout YouTube. It actually isn't just a morning show, but it goes up various segments throughout YouTube on Timcast News. And then Timcast IRL is live from 8 to 10. But it wasn't so much just that. I would say the frustration I had, especially with a clip like that, was that we've had a series of computer failures over a couple of weeks, and none of the backups were operating. And despite, a week ago we had a failure, nobody got the backup operating. So then we had two more failures the next week. And I'm just like, okay, I need to stop this so that I can circle the wagons, get back to the original format, which is functional and working, and I'm running the computers to make it work. But there's actually something else, which I didn't announce, and I didn't want to, but following the reaction from saying this may be the last episode and the difficulties we had, I had talked with my longtime girlfriend, Allison, and we kind of just decided if we restructure a bit, bring it back down, and seek strategic investment, we can keep going and running this show. So my morning show has, about 1.4 million subs, and then Timcast IRL has like 2.2 or 2.3. So it does seem silly to end the bigger show, which has a lot of guests and has a degree of, I think we were the 7th biggest live stream in the world the other day. The issue is, and it's really good news, is that I'm getting married and I'm having a child.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's great.
Thank you. Well, so what we end up with is, am I going to go on my show to millions of people and say, hey, we have to pull things back because I'm going to be a dad and a husband and I'm not going to have time to deal with this. Plus with all the technical failures, frustrations, the concern is security. And so I had a conversation with some friends before any of this was going down. And the general conversation is, do not mention any of this stuff. People will target you. The attacks will get worse. They'll use your family against you. But I suppose following this may be the end because we kind of crashed into a wall. It was a chaotic day. Things were frustrating. And then we had, fans write an open letter, and our paying members were saying, no, we'll make this work. We decided, you know what, let's just announce it. Let's just say that it's going to be impossible to run 2 shows, be the CEO of a company and be a husband and a father at the same time. So something has to change. And I suppose instead of ending the show, the better option is strategic investment, which means someone's going to come in and buy a portion of the company. I don't know how big, maybe, and we are somewhat resistant to that. We don't know if we want to do that, but it means that they can assume management, but we retain majority control, and this allows the company to function while minimizing my workload. So at first, a lot of people were shocked, and my attitude was, I don't know anybody telling them that I'm going to have a family and I'm going to try and keep my personal life private, my private life private, but to our fans, I kind of felt like we did actually owe them. And I also thought the message of having a family, having a kid is probably a good message too. So, Allison and I talked it over and we said, this is probably the better way to go about it. And that's what we're doing.
Wow. So you're not going to do the morning show, but you still will do the IRL show?
We're going to keep doing both.
Oh,
it just means that we're going to need to bring in a CEO, someone from another company or a professional will have to come in and run and maintain and manage and do all the paperwork and, or COO or whatever position that is, so that Allison and I don't have to worry about business management as much and we can focus on family while still operating the core functions, which is these two shows that do really well.
So I hear you on that, because I never imagined what goes into now to do this show. I only do this show 3 days a week, 3 hours each day. So that's 9 hours a week. And it is a heavy lift. And there are so many ins and outs, and now there's just so many things. Now we have advertisers, and we have employees, and we have all kinds of problems that we have to deal with on a daily basis. So I don't work on Tuesday. I don't do the show on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I don't get to sit in my backyard and sun either. It's busy. I have production meetings and other meetings and lawyer meetings, and it is. What I'm saying is that, that there's way more to it than it looks like that goes into something like this. And so I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I wish, let me know if you find a CEO. I'd like to hire one.
Well, that's what strategic investment would be. It's getting an investor, not because we need any money. It's because we need management. So, but, with the morning show and the night show, it's two shifts broken up. So it's probably about 6 hours, then a break where I eat, exercise, and then another 4 or 5 hours. I get to bed usually around midnight, wake up 7:30 to get back and start getting ready for the morning show. There's no way to have family in the middle of there. If in between I get to eat, I get to exercise, and then deal with paperwork and decisions. And so we've got to figure out how to alleviate some of that. But it's good news. It's ultimately good news.
Yeah, you're gonna have a kid. That's great. I'm jealous. Good for you.
I have a bunch. We'll see what happens.
How old are you?
38.
Oh, okay. So you're right in the groove there. Yeah. Okay.
Little old, but this is the thing too. There's a lot of people who say you should have had a family a long time ago, and I'm like, yeah, right. For that past 8 years, I've been trying to run a company and trying to do all of these things, and then it consumes every waking moment. When I first started my first show, which is the Tim Pool Daily News, it's 7 days a week with no days off. Every day doing 2.5 hours of content. Every day, no breaks. And then when we added IRL, I was doing the morning show for 2.5 hours, then Timcast IRL for 2 hours, and weekends. So now it's just, my brain was melting.
Yeah.
And then at some point I decided we'll take weekends off. And then now we're at the point where it's okay. You can't do all of them. You can't do all of it.
You need, like I heard someone explain it, when you read a book, there's a margin. You need margin. Otherwise everything just bleeds together. You need that in your life too. You need empty space around what you're doing. Otherwise your brain fries. Yeah. So,
another big component of it is too, which is over the past couple of weeks, I noticed, Jimmy, there are people who have begun producing shows on YouTube where they've taken clips of me from 3 years ago, taken a clip of Cenk Uygur from a year ago, added them together to make it look like we're talking to each other. It's absolutely nuts. I saw a clip and it said, Tim Pool shuts down Cenk Uygur and crazy debate. And I'm like, that debate never happened. That's not real. But there's more and more of these popping up. I saw one with like David Pakman debating Charlie Kirk. And I think there are people who realized the political space is ripe for attention. And you will get clicks if you claim Pakman and Kirk were debating, even if they weren't. And then all you got to do is take clips from either show and make it look like a Zoom call. I know maybe they really debated. I don't know. But I saw the clip of me and I'm like, that's a clip of me from 3 years ago. And that Cenk is awfully thin. I don't think this is a recent thing. Yeah, right. I got to the point where I was like, this is getting insane. What is going on in the media landscape?
Yeah.
And so, that's another compounding factor. But, I don't know if that factors into whether or not we should. It's actually probably a greater factor into continuing to do the stuff, especially you and me, because someone's got to cut through the noise, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, so I covered this, and I just want, since I'm talking to you, I want to have you comment on it. That story about the U.S. Department of Justice alleges that Tenet Media, which has you, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, received all that money, and they're trying to say it came from Russia. Now, the implication was that it was from the Russian government and that you guys all knew it and were in on it. And of course, when I reported, I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's, probably it's not from the Russian government. It might be from a Russian, but I doubt that you would compromise yourself like that. You don't. But anyway, so do you want to comment on that and straighten everybody out on that?
I can't say too much, but I'll try, I'll keep it simple, but I'll try and keep it informative. That tweet from Yashar Ali is just a total fabrication. It's framing. If you read the indictment, the DOJ issued an indictment on 2 Russians who work for RT who were violating FARA. They didn't register as foreign agents, and they were laundering money. It is 2 Russians who were indicted. Now, it says here that Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin received $10 million from the Russian government. Well, that's absolutely false, 100%. Right. In fact, if you look at the indictment, it never says that. What is alleged is that an American company, which it mentions run by Lauren Chen, had received some degree of money from these Russian actors, and it knew it. What I can tell you is about us is this. So Timcast Daily News, Tim Pool Daily News, and Timcast IRL, they are one company. It's Timcast Corporation. And all of that money comes from its members and sponsors. There's no outside investment. It's just members and sponsors, so like YouTube ads and things like that. We have another company, The Culture War, which produces a show Friday mornings called The Culture War, which is where we have conversations. For instance, a couple weeks ago, we had a discussion about AI and theology. So we had a devout Christian arguing for creationism and what he views, and a professor who was a simulation theorist talking about, outside of the religious context. None of this is overtly political. And so what ends up happening with this deal, in the indictment explicitly states that my production company had a non-exclusive licensing agreement with Tenet Media. What does that mean? Okay, so we launched a show 2 years ago, or about a year and a half ago, that is called The Culture War, that airs on youtube.com/Timcast, always did, still does, and it's also on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. Tenet purchased a license to broadcast it live during production, and that's it. It's imagine you a startup company called Bling Media hit up Jimmy Dore show and said, "Hey Jimmy, can we post your videos? We'll pay you a fee to put it on our channel so that we can build up an audience and like distribute it." You'd be like, "A licensing agreement? Okay, sure." I've licensed content in the past to National Geographic and Discovery and things like that. There's not much to it. So when a Nashville-based company says we'd like to purchase a non-exclusive license to rebroadcast the show, I'm like, sure, gave it to my lawyer. My lawyer checked it out, said, sounds great, here's the fee. And that was, as far as we know, that was it. Next thing I know, we hear this story. And of course, the media is shifting it to be like they received money from Russia and all that stuff. And it's like, look, I have no idea what the other company was doing. We have active licensing agreements with other companies. We have music licensing agreements. We have sponsorship agreements. And nothing's changed. The show still exists. That show never stopped. The Culture War still airs to this day. It is our intellectual property from our production company on YouTube. And so I can't speak for anybody else involved. That's the gist of it on our end. Okay. Sounds sounds straightforward and makes sense to me. Yeah, it sounded like a the Russiagate press. It sounded like an extension of Russiagate propaganda, which we've debunked on this show since day one. And the countries that have real influence in this country and in our elections is not Russia. It's certainly Israel, AIPAC, and now we hear that the Labor Party is trying to get Twitter shut down, and they're sending 100 volunteer workers to work for Kamala Harris in swing states. Right? I mean, can you imagine if Russia was doing that? Wait, is that true? I didn't hear that.
You didn't hear that about the
I know about the kill Twitter thing.
uh-huh.
Kill Musk's Twitter, but
Yeah.
they're sending volunteers to work an American election.
I hope I didn't get that wrong, but yeah, I'm pretty sure about that. Could you look that up about Labor Party sending 100 volunteers to work in swing states for Kamala Harris, the Labor Party? I'm almost positive about this.
I just didn't hear it, but even the fact that I saw the story, it said Kamala's UK campaign advisor wants to kill Musk. And I was like, why does an American presidential candidate have a UK advisor?
Yes.
And why are they targeting an American company in this way? Like, that in and of itself is already insane.
And, calling the Labor Party is like calling Hugh Hefner a feminist. It's they're really. Do you think there are any left-wing major parties in the West anymore? They all seem like they've all shifted to become neocons and warmongers and anti-free speech. I mean, the people who my whole life, Tim, they called themselves liberals, are against bodily choice. During COVID, they were for mandatory vaccinations. That's some experimental medical treatment. They're against free speech. They're for censorship, and they're pro-war everywhere.
Pro-war.
So yeah, what do you make of that?
It is crazy. I mean, what's fascinating is, in terms of policy, I'm probably like moderate liberal, and I'll explain because people won't believe it. And I'm like, I lean pro-choice. I'm not a pro-lifer. I'm traditional Democrat, where it's safe, legal, rare. That's the slightly liberal position on the issue. Economically, I'm in favor of a universal basic form of healthcare, meaning I don't think it can be so simple as all healthcare all the time, no matter what is covered, because there's limitations in medical technology. But I certainly think a kid who gets the flu should be able to go in and get some Tamiflu, and we shouldn't send a bill to the family or bankrupt people. So there's a degree to where we try and figure out how we manage and maintain a healthcare system like that. But that's economic policy. I'm also opposed to foreign intervention. It's funny because these talk about the trade agreements and things like this. You go back to 1999 battle in Seattle, I'd probably fit in really well with those leftists. Today, they're pro-war across the board. And I'm wondering how it is some of these prominent progressive leftist personalities are simultaneously running this, the military-industrial complex is bad. And then a second later, they're like, I'm supporting the war in Ukraine. We should send more money. And I'm like, but that's the same thing.
Yeah.
So it feels like there was a left at some point, but there certainly was a left. And I don't know how big it ever was. I feel like there was probably always some nefarious corporate elements that were trying to control true activists that believed in, I don't know, more social program type economics. But what I see now is pro-war. I see weird social behaviors that have nothing to do with left economic policy. And I see anti-free speech and anti-freedom, which I suppose you could argue is at least to some degree in the authoritarian spectrum or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I'd probably agree with you. I would have called myself left, 13 years ago or whatever. I don't even like calling myself right now because I'm like, I don't know where this deviation happened, where if you are a pro-life, economically progressive individual, but you think Kamala Harris is a warmonger, they're going to call you far right and right wing.
Yeah.
I mean, calling you or Joe Rogan right wing, I'm like, then right wing means you're pro truth and free speech and anti-war.
Right.
It's weird, isn't it?
It is. And it's a weird thing how if you stand up for traditional, they'll call you a free speech absolutist. Hey, you know what? Who else was a free speech absolutist? Thomas Jefferson. I don't know.
I mean, look, this is the crazy thing. I don't even consider myself a free speech absolutist. I think it's fine to say, we don't want threats of violence. There are some limitations. Yeah. The Supreme Court makes these decisions. But it's crazy how their position is we should control the oligarchic technological monopoly and suppress opinions that are bad. I'm like, okay, that's authoritarianism.
100%. So did we find out about the Labor Party?
What we have found is that they were doing it on their own.
Yeah, so volunteers.
According to Keir Starmer, the PM.
So the Labor Party sent 100 volunteers to work for Kamala.
But they were doing it on their own time, not supposedly
That's why
affiliated.
I'm saying volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
They said so. The Labor Party sent 100 volunteers to the swing states to work for Kamala Harris. Imagine if Vladimir Putin sent 100 volunteers to the swing states to work for Donald Trump. Imagine the whole country would shut down.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, speaking of crazy, so Thomas Massey, I think we could both, I don't know. I think, I don't agree with him on everything, but I agree with that he's one of the few people I think who has integrity in politics, if maybe not the only person I know in Congress anyway, on a national level. And he recently called for us to end funding Israel. He says, if Israel insists on destroying civilian targets in Lebanon, let them buy and build their own weapons. American taxpayers should not be funding this. And so he shows this building. So that's an apartment building. And then it gets leveled. Here it is. It gets leveled. Watch. Let me get to the video. Here it is. So Thomas Massey's conclusion is we should stop funding and Israel and let them build their own weapons. What do you say to that, Tim?
Oh boy, this is not an easy one, is it? But
No.
I would say I closely agree. Closely, I'm not well versed enough to come out and make a definitive statement that we should defund completely. But I will try and give my best answer, which is it's one thing to say we have a longstanding military alliance with Israel. There are enemies that are attacking it, and we want to make sure that they're able to defend themselves. Iran's firing missiles, Hezbollah's firing missiles. But yeah, when we come to the point where civilian buildings in Lebanon are being bombed by Israel, we're looking at an expansion of war, which I don't think the U.S. people in a military alliance have agreed to or declared themselves, which would be the simple answer is, if Israel wants to make moves externally, which are basically declarations of war or expansions of war, then Congress probably has to make a declaration that the United States is on board with this conflict if we're sending money to that. So I'm not the smartest guy in the world on this issue. I'm not going to pretend to have the best answers in the world. But what I can say is, at the very least, the moment Israel makes a move like this, our funding should be suspended for any external conflict, and Congress should probably have to make a statement, because if we're funding Israel, who's using rockets to blow up targets in Israel, that's the U.S. being involved in war. Now, unfortunately, Congress hasn't declared war since World War II, so I don't expect it to happen. But I would largely agree with Massey on this one.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear, because I largely agree. And I'm when it comes to Israel and Gaza, I'm pretty radical as far as I can tell. Most people. Go ahead.
I'm not nearly as radical. You know, I think there's with Ukraine, I think it's fairly cut and dry. We do have an agreement. It was a paper agreement, not a real treaty, where we said if you get invaded and you give up your nukes, we'll defend you. I don't like the idea that one generation promises the children of the next. That Ron Paul said that. That's a good point. And Ukraine just, it doesn't make sense for the U.S. to be involved in this dispute, which is largely has to do with Sevastopol, the Russian industrial center and naval base. It's the home of their Black Sea Fleet. NATO is clearly creating war pressures by intervening in the way they've done over the past decade. Israel's a longstanding ally going back 70 plus years. That being said, a really great point was made on my show. I can't remember who said it. It was Clint Russell. And he said, the idea that the only way Israel can exist is through perpetual U.S. funding is absurd. And they should probably get to the point where they can sustain themselves. And I completely agree with that. So there's a difference in, I don't think we should cut off funding for defensive purposes in the immediate, because that would probably result in an Afghanistan times 10. But I think the goal right now should be setting a deadline of when they're going to sustain themselves, when we decide we will not be involved. And I think it's fair to say that if they're now getting involved in external conflicts with countries like Lebanon and Iran, we as the United States may agree to provide defense and funding to an ally. But if they're now sparking wars, and by all means, look, someone's going to argue Lebanon, Hezbollah started the war, fine. But if a war is starting, Congress needs to declare whether or not we as the United States are going to be involved in that. And if we provide funding to Israel, for which it is used to attack these countries, and that results in, say, Iran declaring war on us, Congress has to make a declaration. We can't just blindly fund these things.
Yeah, I would. At least Trump. You saw what he said on the PBD podcast. I hope the other day he said that he's not for regime change in Iran, that we can't even run our own country. So that seems like the sanest thing I've heard somebody say about Iran in a long time. Would you agree with that?
I do, but I will say I think Trump's going to be a largely pro-Israel president. And while I'm not trying to suggest that I'm staunchly anti-Israel, I think people who are anti-intervention or concerned with war should recognize while Trump probably is going to say great things as it pertains to Ukraine, Russia, Taiwan, China, Iran, I think when it comes to the conflict affecting Israel, Trump's probably going to offer a lot of funding, and it's probably going to expand war in the region.
It's better, do you think it's better for, I was at the Democratic convention and it was all very rah war, and they didn't want to there was no diplomacy. There was no so Trump says, I can get along with these tough guys. I get along with China. I get along with North Korea and Russia. And I know how to, and isn't that better than wanting to have war? I mean, what happened to diplomacy?
It's crazy, isn't it? I do think I want to put an addendum on what I just said. I think the greater probability with Trump is peace agreements and a de-escalation. I'm not saying it's a majority, but I'm saying it's a much higher likelihood than under the Democrat neo-party or neo-lib neocon uniparty. But look, Donald Trump crossed the demilitarized zone into North Korea with no security detail. It's one of the greatest things he did in his first term. He walked across with Kim Jong-un. They shook hands. He stood in North Korea and he walked back. And I got to ask some of his staff about that, and they were like, we were freaking out because we didn't plan this. He just did it. That's amazing. We're not friends with North Korea. We don't like how they run things. They're not good people, but we want peace. We don't want a war. We don't want nuclear weapons. And Trump recognizes that, and he got attacked in the media for these attempts at peace. Look, you're fighting with your neighbor because he keeps, taking your newspaper or whatever. You come to an agreement and say, stop taking my newspaper. We're going to stop fighting. It doesn't mean you like each other, but it means we're going to chill things out. They attacked Trump over this, and it's absurd. I even met a guy who hated Donald Trump. He had Trump derangement syndrome. And when he asked me, he's like, how could you possibly like the guy? And I said he crossed the DMZ with no security detail in an effort to show a peace offering to North Korea. And he goes, no, he didn't. It never happened. The media doesn't want to admit that Donald Trump is the peace candidate. They don't want people to realize that. They want you to think Trump is Hitler and he's going to start all these wars when he's, in fact, the only president in my lifetime who did not start a war.
Why do you think that the deep state is so in unison against Donald Trump? And they have been since he became president. I have theories I've shared with my audience, but it's clear that they are. In fact, when the 51 CIA agents or intelligence officials who said that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, they did that to aid Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, not Donald Trump. So what is it, do you think, about Donald Trump that they have such an allergic reaction to him, meaning the intelligence community, the war machine?
I think you look at someone like Barack Obama, and he gets in the office. The deep state says, all right, Barack, here's our plan. And Barack says, okay, I guess that's what we're going to do because the deep state says so, right? Donald Trump gets in office, and he has these meetings. I remember when he was having these meetings with various high-ranking members of the Republican Party and government officials. And I'm willing to bet, based on all the news stories, I'm putting this together, Trump sits down and he says, look, I'm the president, and here's what I want to do. I promised a border wall. I promised to stop illegal immigration. I promised to get rid of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I promised to get our troops out of the Middle East. And the deep state goes, right. We know. And like every president, here's the file showing you what's really going to happen. And Trump probably went, no, I'm going to do what I want to do. And they said, Mr. President, that's not how things work. We have a plan. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And Trump said, no, I think that's okay. I think I'm going to do what I want to do. And so he comes out of this meeting. I remember watching his car leave one of these buildings. They can't control the guy. Whatever it is you think about Donald Trump, I think everyone can admit that if he's going into a room full of a bunch of deep state, CIA, whatever it is, FBI, he's just going to be like, I don't care, you're wrong. I'm doing whatever I want. You can't stop me. And then what did Chuck Schumer say? They got 6 ways from Sunday from stopping you.
That's right.
I think that's it. I think Trump is concerned that I think Trump has a deep hole within him that needs to be filled by love and admiration from people. Some might call that a bad thing, some a good thing, whatever. But the guy puts his name in gold letters on top of buildings. I don't. Is there any other real estate mogul who does that? I think it's just Trump who wants to make sure everybody sees his name. When Trump goes in those meetings with the deep state and they say, we want to blow up kids, we want to invade foreign countries, he goes, but then everyone's going to hate me. And they're like, yeah, well, that's too bad. You're president. He goes, yeah, no way. I'm going to go out there and put smiles on faces and try and get as many people as possible to like me. And I'm not going to go start these wars. And that probably ticked him off.
Yeah, I what I say is that Trump is New York real estate evil. He's not deep state neocon warmonger evil, right? Which is a total different thing. I'm sure I stole it from someone else. But before I let you go, I just wanted to show you this. This was a kind of an amazing story. The man who Trump freed from federal prison. So they always say Donald Trump is a racist and he's black. Of course, we know that Joe Biden is the reason why black and brown people are locked up much higher rates than their population because of the crime bill, which he still brags about and has never apologized for. Well, Donald Trump actually did the STEP Act, which let a lot of people of color out of prison. He served almost 2 decades for a nonviolent crime. He was just released a video thanking Donald Trump. And here it is. Let me play it for you.
Man, I just want to thank these people in this book and show them some appreciation.
Well, he wrote a book about it.
Wow.
For being a part of my life and helping me turn my storm into a story and write a book called Duke Got Life, because on October 21st, 2020, President Donald J. Trump was used as a vessel, and he freed me after losing all my appeals and being denied by the Obama administration. And I had no way of coming home on a double life sentence for a nonviolent drug crime. But because of God and him, I will never surrender. You shouldn't either. God bless you all. Thank you.
Wow.
So that's pretty powerful stuff, don't you think?
Yeah. I like Trump.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so I like Trump.
And isn't it wild that like they never talk about this in the media? They never talk about the step back. Trump almost never talks about it. When he went and he was interviewed by the National Association of Black Journalists, he didn't even bring it up. And I'm like, well, he didn't bring up Kamala Harris for imprisoning black people for the prison labor. He didn't bring that up. He didn't bring up the step back. Isn't it? It's just amazing, right? How reality is so much different than what is the propaganda that is painted in the corporate media, right?
Yeah, look at the Atlantic piece they just put out the other day or last week. It says Trump is speaking like Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini. Like, okay, the Hitler thing didn't work, so you're going to try all three now. But it's wild that people have this perception. I went to, when Trump was running the first time, I went to Trump Tower. He has the ice cream shop in there. He's got the steakhouse. And I went to the employees, and I was like, I ordered a scoop of ice cream, and I asked the guy, I was like, so do you see Trump come down here a lot? And he's like, yeah, he's down here quite a bit. I said, how is he? Do you like him? Oh, we love the guy. He's so nice. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, whenever he comes down, he hands out $100 bills to everybody. And I'm like, really? So I was at Mar-a-Lago, earlier in the year, and I go to the gift shop, and there's some nice ladies working there, and they'd been there for decades. And I said, so how do you like working for Donald Trump? And they're like, oh, he's fantastic. He's he's a gentleman, and he comes in, he's very nice to us. He compliments you. And then I said, yeah, does he do anything? Like, when he comes in, does he like help you guys out? Does he give you stuff? And sure enough, they go, he comes in here and he hands us $100 bills. And then I'm like, well, there's one way to get people to like you. But the narrative I hear from the people who've actually worked for him is he's a really nice guy. He takes care of everybody. He hands out $100 bills. There was another story where a guy, Trump was in his limo and he got a flat tire. And this couple pulled over and asked if they needed any help fixing the tire. And so they helped the guy, Trump's waiting for the tire to get fixed, and this guy helped. And the next thing the guy knows, his mortgage was paid off. And Trump got asked about that. Is that a true story? And Trump's like, yeah. And they're like, you never talk about it? And he's like, well, how am I going to talk about it? Just come out and announce that I 20 years ago paid a guy's mortgage off? No, I just, just did it. And so those are the stories the media doesn't cover. They don't want to push a narrative where it's Donald Trump actually didn't start any wars. He is far from perfect. There were an increase in drone strikes. There were commando raids, things we don't like, but he did inherit wars. He did set timelines to get our troops out of the Middle East. He did try to bring these peace agreements, and that flies in the face of the deep state. So the corporate narrative has to always be the most insane and absurd things. But you know what? When they get to the point where they say Trump says he wants generals like Hitler, and he's talking like Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini, I'm like, yeah, I think at a certain point, the public just becomes desensitized and says, you're lying and none of this makes sense anymore. And so it may not be the positive stories, but I think now we're at the point where when they run these hit pieces against Trump, the average person just waves it off like, this is just nonsense.
I really do think they overplayed their hand. And I make the point in my stand-up act that my whole life, the establishment loved Donald Trump. He was on the cover of every magazine. He hosted Saturday Night Live. He did commercials for computer companies. He did a commercial for McDonald's in 2002. They gave him his own network television show for 10 years. Hollywood nominated him for Emmys. They loved Donald Trump up until, as Tucker Carlson said, they're afraid he's going to do one less war than they want.
Yep.
And
that's it.
And, and I also found out that January 6th in Brazil, they did their own version of January 6th. Did you know about that story?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just found out about that.
Even had a shaman.
No kidding.
Well, I don't know if it's true, but there is a guy from a Brazilian protest who is wearing shaman-like gear, but I don't know if it was the same political protest. It was people were joking about it. Yeah, but it is funny.
Well, Tim, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on. Always good to talk with you. And I'm glad to hear you're going to have a baby and start a family. Congratulations on that. And the breaking news is Tim is staying with his 2 shows. He's not canceling his show. His show morning show and evening show will still be there. So everybody can rest easy.
Right on. Thanks for having me, Jimmy.
Okay, Tim. Good to talk to you, buddy. Talk to you soon.
Have a good one.
All right. Over to Steph.
Okay, here we go. I'll look here. There are 3 Canadian premiers who are doing Kamala events. SC Dodds. Sparky, both Ukraine and Israel have taxpayer-funded health care. American taxpayers. Sparky, thank you very much. The extent to which someone has bad takes like this is to the extent to which they're still denial of reality due to being in denial of their own childhood. Hannah, sir. Let's see here. Hold on. Ukraine never had nukes to give up. Any nukes deployed there were always Russian and controlled from Moscow. Sparky. All right. To say that Ukraine had nukes is like saying that West Germany had nukes just because the U.S. Army had nukes there during the Cold War. Sparky. Ruling the entire world is the opposite of democracy. They don't believe in democracy at all. If we had real democracy like hunter-gatherers, none of this would be happening. Civilizations are never democratic. Hannah, sir.
Okay.
All right, back to Jimmy.
Hey, turns out there's a whistleblower over at the BBC that said that the BBC got direct instructions to safeguard Israel's image during Israel's carpet bombing of Gaza and the slaughtering of the children and women. Here we go.
Israel has a right to defend itself. That was the editorial line that was drilled into us, into all of our coverage. It was really an integral part of the editorial stance. To a guest talking about, Israeli airstrikes killing Palestinians in Gaza, that would be the response from our presenters.
Denying access to food is collective punishment, and that we should all be clear in saying that.
Israel will argue, obviously, that it has a right to defend itself.
People were terrified of using the word genocide in coverage. They still are. You will very rarely see it in any BBC coverage. And if an interviewee says the word genocide...
This is a genocide happening in front of our eyes.
That word is, as you know, incredibly emotive, and the Israelis, as you know, will be saying that they are targeting Hamas only.
The presenter will almost always panic.
The Labour Party, of all political parties, which has always had a strong peace contingent within it, is now actually supporting genocide.
Okay, we can maybe just avoid that language if that's okay.
So I think it's pretty obvious that that's what's been happening at the BBC, but it's nice to have somebody on the inside. Al Jazeera, by the way, did that. Recently, I understood, was it the United States? Who was it that asked Al Jazeera to relax on their coverage? Somebody. But anyway, here's a very similar story you get from Canada, eh? It says CBC has whitewashed Israel's crimes in Gaza. I saw it firsthand. Working for 5 years as a producer at the public broadcaster, I witnessed the double standards and discrimination in its coverage of Palestine and experienced directly how CBC disciplines those who speak out. That's by someone named Molly Schumann. So, so there you go. Supposed to be public broadcasting. It's actually doing the bidding of Israel. And good on Al Jazeera for breaking that story, and good for the whistleblower. Is anybody surprised? I mean, all you have to do is to watch. The mainstream coverage is it is remarkable. And we just did a story yesterday about how they allowed a journalist on to wag his finger and criticize MSNBC's coverage of Gaza, and NBC deleted that video. So, by the way, that video got taken down. We're going to try and get it back up on YouTube, along with our other video featuring Jose Vega and Scott Ritter. So both of those, we're working to get those edited in a way that we could get them back up on the channel. So fingers crossed, we get that done and they go back up tomorrow. Okay, so that's we're gonna do a premium streamium today.
Yep.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna jump on that premium streamium, and that's at. Well, as soon as you're done with your thing, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Steph's got some more Rumble rants and super chats. I want to remind everybody that we're going to be in Columbus, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, and Lexington, Kentucky.